My name is Courtney Bennett. I'm 34 years old, and up until recently, I thought I knew what loyalty meant. So I thought marriage meant partnership, support, and presence. But as I sat beside my mother-in-law Helen's hospital bed, listening to the faint hum of machines and the quiet beep of her heart monitor fading into one long, steady tone, I realized how alone I truly was. She passed at exactly 3:42 p.m. on a Tuesday. No one was there but me. Not her son, my husband Josh. Not his sister Rachel. Not even a single message asking how she was. The hallway outside her room was filled with the sounds of life, family members laughing, hugging, welcoming their loved ones back from surgery or illness. Inside Helen's room, it was just me, just silence. As I sat there holding her cooling hand, a nurse quietly entered. She'd been kind during our 3-day vigil, the only witness to my quiet desperation, calls unanswered, messages ignored, footsteps that never stopped at our door. She looked at me with that practiced softness that only nurses in these wings can manage and handed me a sealed envelope. She asked me to give this to you, the nurse said, only after. I nodded and took it, my fingers trembling. Helen and I had never been close. She was always polite but distant, cordial in that surface-level way. We never shared secrets or heartfelt talks, and yet she'd made sure I would be the one to receive this. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of thick stationery. A small, rusted key was taped to the top. Beneath it, a handwritten address and one chilling line of text. They never loved me. Now they will learn what it means to be forgotten. The words didn't make sense at first. Not fully. I stared at them as the nurse gently guided me into a chair. I was still trying to process it when the paperwork came, the death certificate, the list of personal effects, nightgown, glasses, a worn paperback. I stepped out of the hospital into the bright afternoon sun, numb and heavy. Around me, people were smiling, helping each other into cars, holding flowers and balloons. Meanwhile, I clutched a key from a woman who, for the first time in years, had finally said something that felt deeply, disturbingly real. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, the key burning in my palm, knowing that tomorrow I would follow the address Helen left for me. And nothing would be the same again. By 7 the next morning, I had made my decision. I didn't tell Josh where I was going. He hadn't asked about Helen's passing, not really. When I told him she had died, his only response was a distracted, "Oh, when did that happen?" followed by some excuse about meetings, and how she was never easy. The indifference had hollowed something in me. I didn't owe him an explanation now. The GPS led me out of town, past the suburbs into quiet, winding country roads where the air smelled of soil and sunlight. Eventually, it directed me down a gravel driveway nearly swallowed by overgrown bushes. A rusted iron gate stood half open, as though waiting for me. The cottage beyond it was small and weathered. Its white paint had peeled back to gray, like a memory fading with time. Wild rose bushes crawled up one side, their thorns scratching at shuttered windows. It was the kind of place that had once been loved, then left untouched for years. Forgotten but not neglected. The key turned in the lock with ease. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of dust and old paper. Light filtered through partly closed curtains, illuminating floating specks in the air like tiny ghosts. The house was intact, fully furnished, lived in, but frozen in time. Books lined the shelves. A stack of photo albums rested on the coffee table. On the kitchen counter sat a tea kettle, a ceramic mug, and a single envelope. It was addressed not to me but to Helen's lawyer. To be opened upon my death, the label read. I stood still for a long time, letting the silence of the place sink in. This wasn't a storage property or some forgotten summer cabin. This was Helen's real home, not the sterile room at the assisted living center that Josh had chosen for her. This was where she had lived when she needed peace. This was where her spirit remained. And somehow, she had chosen to share this place with me. I didn't know why. I didn't understand it yet, but I felt it. The way she used to look at me when she thought I wasn't watching, there had been something in her eyes. Not warmth, not exactly, more like consideration, calculation maybe. Had she been watching me all this time, weighing me, measuring me against her own children? The envelope for the lawyer pulsed with a quiet importance. I placed it carefully in my purse, knowing I would deliver it the next day. But for now, I sat down at the old kitchen table. I let my hands rest flat on the wood. It was smooth but worn, the surface scarred with years of cups and elbows and quiet meals. Helen had chosen this place, and now she had chosen me. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. Inside, I sat alone but not lonely. For the first time since she died, I didn't feel like I was mourning a stranger. I felt like I was stepping into a story she had waited years to tell. The next morning, I arrived early at the office of Margaret Keller, attorney at law. It was a modest building in the historic district, red brick, narrow windows, a hanging sign that creaked softly in the wind. Josh drove us in silence, his grip on the steering wheel white-knuckled. We picked up Rachel just outside the office. She was already annoyed, cigarette in hand, muttering about losing a half-day's pay. "This is ridiculous," she snapped as she stabbed out the cigarette with her boots. "Mom didn't have anything worth reading a will over." I didn't respond. I just held my purse tighter, the envelope from the cottage still tucked inside. Inside the office, two older women were already seated, Diane Mercer and Eleanor Thompson, women I vaguely recognized from Helen's church events over the years. They looked just as puzzled to be there, though they offered me kind nods. Margaret Keller was poised and composed, silver hair in a neat bun, her eyes sharp behind a pair of reading glasses. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "As Helen Walsh's legal representative for the past 15 years, I have been entrusted with the execution of her final wishes." Josh checked his watch with exaggerated irritation. Rachel crossed her arms tightly. The room was silent, save for the faint rustle of legal documents being arranged. "This is the last will and testament of Helen Elizabeth Walsh," Mrs. Keller continued. "Revised and notarized 2 months ago, on March 15th of this year." I blinked. That was the day she'd asked me to drive her downtown for an appointment. I waited in the car while she said it was about her medication plan. I hadn't questioned it. Mrs. Keller began the reading. "To my son, Joshua Bennett," she read, "I leave my forgiveness, though you have not earned it." Josh's head snapped up. "What the hell does that mean?" "To my daughter, Rachel Bennett," Keller went on, "I leave my wedding band, which you once admired. May it remind you that promises should be kept." Rachel's face turned red. "This is a joke, right?" "To my friends, Diane Mercer and Eleanor Thompson," Mrs. Keller continued, "I leave my deepest gratitude for the kindness you showed me in my final year, and a gift of $5,000 each." The two women gasped quietly, glancing at each other. "And to my daughter-in-law, Courtney Bennett," she said, her tone measured, "I leave the entirety of my remaining estate, including my primary residence at 47 Willow Lane, all bank accounts, investment portfolios, insurance policies, and personal belongings." The room exploded. "What?" Rachel shouted. "That's insane." She barely knew her. "There must be a mistake," Josh added, rising to his feet. "This isn't right. Courtney wasn't even close to her." Mrs. Keller remained perfectly composed. "There is no mistake. Helen was of sound mind and fully competent. We have a recent psychiatric evaluation from a licensed professional conducted 1 week before the will revision. She also recorded a video explaining her decisions, which can be presented to the court if needed." Josh stared at me like I'd betrayed him. "You knew about this, didn't you? You manipulated her when she was sick. Took advantage while she was confused." "I didn't know," I said, my voice shaking. "She told me she had a medication appointment." I sat in the car. "How convenient," Rachel spat. "The loyal daughter-in-law act worked, huh?" "You're welcome to contest it," Mrs. Keller said smoothly, "but I would advise against it. Everything was done properly." She turned to me. "The cottage alone is valued at approximately $300,000. Her investment accounts total just over $270,000. Insurance policies add another $150,000. Helen lived modestly, but she was very wise with her finances." Josh collapsed back into his chair, stunned. Rachel shook her head, eyes narrow. "We'll fight this. I don't care what it costs." Mrs. Keller slid a document forward. "You're welcome to review the psychiatric report and the video. But legally, her wishes stand." She closed the portfolio gently. "Now, if you don't mind, I'd like a word with Miss Bennett alone." The others shuffled out in tense silence, the air heavy with disbelief and fury. I stayed seated, pulse pounding in my ears. When the door clicked shut, Mrs. Keller handed me a second envelope. "Helen asked me to give you this after the reading. She said you would understand." I opened it slowly, the paper crackling in my hands. Inside was one line, in Helen's unmistakable handwriting. "Forgive no one. Let them beg. Let them kneel. And when they do, smile, turn, and walk away." I sat still for a moment, absorbing the words. They weren't cruel. They were deliberate. Helen hadn't just passed on her estate. She had passed on a legacy. A legacy of truth. I walked out of Margaret Keller's office with the letter folded tightly in my hand. Outside, Josh was pacing near the curb, his face a storm of confusion and rage. Rachel was already gone, no doubt racing to call a lawyer, or perhaps just to scream into the void. Josh didn't say anything as I approached. He looked at me like a stranger. I suppose in many ways I was. Not because I had changed, but because he had never cared enough to truly see me. "I'm going to stay at the cottage tonight," I said quietly. "There are things I need to sort through." His expression shifted instantly, anger fading into calculation. "Of course," he said smoothly. "Take all the time you need. It's overwhelming, I'm sure." The sudden softness in his voice felt rehearsed, strategic. I didn't answer. I just got in my car and drove. The cottage felt different that evening. The wind had died down, and the light through the windows was golden and still. I turned on a few lamps, swept away a layer of dust from the old kitchen table, and made tea. I moved slowly, deliberately, as though the walls were watching. On a shelf by the fireplace, I noticed a neat row of journals, leather-bound, aged, each marked with a year in Helen's precise handwriting. I chose the most recent one. "Ben's been gone 7 years today," the first page read. "Josh called for the first time in months. He needed money for car repairs. I gave it to him because I still believe a mother's love should be unconditional. Ben would be furious with me." I kept reading. Entry after entry. Calls ignored. Holidays spent alone. Times when Helen sat at her dining table with food for 4 out of habit, out of hope, knowing no one was coming. Rachel texted last Christmas, she wrote in one entry. Said they're spending it in Vermont. Josh never replied at all. I lit a candle and played music. Pretended it didn't matter. These weren't the ramblings of a bitter woman. They were the quiet confessions of someone who had been erased by the people she gave everything to. The deeper I read, the clearer her decision became. Helen had chosen me not because we were close, but because I had been present. Because I had seen her not just in her final days but in the silences in between. I had shown up when no one else did. And now she was showing up for me. She hadn't wanted revenge for herself. She wanted justice for the parts of her that had been neglected, ignored, and dismissed. She wanted to leave behind not just assets, but truth, and she had made me the carrier of it. That night, I fell asleep on the couch with her journal in my lap and her words in my chest. Forgive no one. Let them kneel. And when they do, walk away. The next morning, I woke to soft light filtering through the curtains and the creak of old floorboards, adjusting to the day. I made coffee in the dusty kitchen, my movements slow and thoughtful. The house felt different now, less like a secret and more like a message. A place that had waited not just for someone but for me. After breakfast, I wandered into the main bedroom. It was modest, an old quilt folded at the foot of the bed, a few framed photographs on the dresser. Tucked under the bed was a wooden chest, its brass latch slightly tarnished. Inside were bundles of letters, tied with faded blue ribbon. I sat cross-legged on the floor and untied the first bundle. They were letters from Ben, Helen's late husband. Most had been written during his final year. His handwriting, though shaky, was clear and tender. He spoke of love, regret, pride, and fear. And in nearly every letter, one worry echoed the way their children had grown cold. My dearest Helen, one letter read, I know you want to believe Josh will come around. But you and I both know he only shows up when he needs something. You've always given too much, and they've come to expect it. Please promise me you'll look after yourself when I'm gone. Promise me you won't let them take the last pieces of you. Letter after letter revealed the same story, two parents who had built a life from love and sacrifice, only to watch it be taken for granted. I returned to Helen's journals that afternoon, reading entries that stretched back years. Her handwriting stayed consistent, neat, patient, disciplined. She recorded everything. When Rachel mocked her clothes at Thanksgiving. When Josh canceled dinner again for urgent meetings. When she sat through birthdays, anniversaries, and doctor appointments alone. Most heartbreaking of all were her holiday entries. Christmas Eve, made a roast chicken, set the table for 4. It felt silly, but I couldn't help it. Played Ben's old records. Danced a little by myself in the living room. Pretended someone might knock on the door. These weren't the notes of someone seeking pity. They were records of resilience. Helen had preserved her truth in ink, waiting for someone to find it. That someone was me. She had seen something in me, a willingness to listen, to notice, to remember. And through that she had entrusted me with more than her belongings. She had given me the full story. Not the sanitized version Josh and Rachel would tell at holidays, but the honest, unflinching truth of what it meant to be forgotten by the people you loved most. And in doing so, she had ensured that her final act wouldn't be silence. It would be legacy. That evening, as I sat on the porch of the cottage, Helen's final note echoing in my mind, I understood the weight of what she had left me. Not just keys or deeds or financial accounts. She had left me the truth. And once you hold the truth in your hands, you can never pretend you don't know. You can only decide what to do with it. When I returned to the city the next day, Josh was waiting for me on the front porch. He stood as I parked, offering a hesitant smile one I hadn't seen since before Helen's decline. It was thin, uncertain, almost rehearsed. "Hey," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, "I've been thinking, maybe we should talk. About everything. About us." I studied him. For years, I had waited for this version of him, the one who might finally want to be present. But now I saw it for what it was, not love, not remorse. It was fear. "I'm going to the cottage tonight," I said, walking past him. "There's still a lot to go through." "Of course," he said again, that same gentle tone, too quick, too smooth, "whatever you need." I didn't answer. That night, back at the cottage, I turned on the lamps, swept the entryway clean, and unpacked an overnight bag. But I wasn't just staying the night. I had made a decision. This house wasn't a retreat. It wasn't just an escape. It was a beginning. Over the following days, I started cleaning out rooms, boxing up Helen's personal items with care, but keeping the ones that mattered: her journals, her letters, her photos. I found sketches, notes in the margins of books, a dozen starts to short stories she'd never finished. And I found her plans, ideas scribbled on yellowing notepads: writing workshop for women over 60, community reading group, volunteer program for women who live alone. She had dreams she never spoke aloud. But now I could. I contacted a nonprofit consultant. I started drafting a plan to restore the cottage not just as a home, but as a haven somewhere women like Helen could gather, write, talk, heal. When Josh called 2 days later to check in, I let it go to voicemail. He left a message asking if I was okay. Then a second message the next day, more pressing. By the third call, he sounded nervous. But I didn't answer. I was done explaining my worth. Done justifying my presence. Helen had given me the power she never had the power to choose myself, to say no, to step out of the role of good wife or dutiful daughter-in-law. And for the first time, I felt the weight of silence not as punishment but as strength. They had made their choices. Now I was making mine. I sat on the porch of the cottage as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the lawn. The wild roses rustled in the evening breeze, brushing softly against the window panes like a memory that refused to fade. Helen had left me many things: real estate, accounts, insurance. But none of it meant more than the truth she entrusted me with. She had lived a life full of quiet disappointments, of being needed but not valued, present but invisible. And yet, instead of bitterness, she chose clarity. Instead of revenge, she chose revelation. She made me the vessel for her voice, the keeper of her truth. "Worried every journal now," answered the last of the letters she never sent. "I've started the paperwork to turn the cottage into a community space just like she dreamed. A quiet place for older women to write, gather, speak. Not one more story left behind." Josh hasn't called in a while. I think he finally understands that I'm not coming back, not as his wife, not as his excuse, not as the shadow of a woman he failed to love. Rachel sent a bitter email last week. I didn't reply. Because Helen's words still live in me. Forgive no one. Let them beg. Let them kneel. And when they do, smile, turn, and walk away. I don't carry hatred in my heart, just truth, just memory, just the sharp, unshakable knowledge that sometimes the deepest love is knowing when to let go and when to speak. If you've ever been made to feel invisible, unimportant, or replaceable, hear this. You are none of those things. You are worthy of being seen, heard, and honored. So stand. Stand in your silence. Stand in your strength. And when they finally notice, when they come with apologies, explanations, and regret, smile, turn, and walk away. If Helen's story touched your heart, or if you know someone who's lived in the shadow of others too long, share this. Like this video, leave a comment. Let someone know they're not alone. Because sometimes the quietest voices leave the loudest echoes. And sometimes the forgotten write the ending. On their terms. Thank you for spending this time with us and with Helen's story. It wasn't just a tale of inheritance, it was about dignity reclaimed, silence broken, and the quiet courage of being seen when no one else is looking. If you've ever felt like Courtney or Helen, we hope this reminded you that your presence matters, even if others fail to see it. Please like this video if it resonated with you. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. And leave a comment. We read every one. You are not invisible here. Subscribe to The Art of Revenge for more true stories with heart, healing, and quiet power.